So it's 7 o'clock, time to begin the April 24th Parks and Recreation Commission. The first thing we'll have is roll call.
Commissioner Cripps? Here. Commissioner Greenfield?
Here.
Commissioner Lemire?
Here.
Commissioner McCulley? Commissioner McDougall?
Here.
Commissioner Moss? Here. Commissioner Rechtel?
Here.
And Councilman Scharf.
Thank you. Are there any changes, additions, comments on the agenda? Kristen.
The only comment I wanted to make is under number 7, the tentative agenda for May 29th. That's actually should be May 22nd.
Thank you. The next thing is oral communications. Oral communications are topics that are not on the agenda this evening. I have 2 cards, one talking about airplane noise, one talking about the tennis courts. If Mark Schul is here. I am. I thought it was so. If you'd like to hear it, I can. In fact, I think we would concede that airplane noise is something we have little or no influence over in the Parks Department. That's true. Thank you. Robin Cook. Would you like to speak now? I don't believe our tennis courts on the agenda. Yes. Okay. Item number 5. So we'll do this later then. Thank you. The next thing, department report.
Chair McDougall, if I could comment, since we do have people here to talk about the pickleball and tennis courts, do we want to keep the agenda?
I would be quite happy to adjust the agenda and move the pickleball discussion up, and I'm sure Adam wouldn't mind either. So we should have the comments first and then the discussion?
Well, I don't think we should move it right away, only because there could be some people that are still coming. But maybe
okay.
We could move it before the temporary lighting at Coverly. Sure,
make 5, 4, and so just change the 2 of them. Thank you for that suggestion. So department report.
Good evening, Darren Anderson with Open Space Parks and Golf. I've got a few brief updates for you. We mentioned at the last commission meeting that we're working on the Coverly bleachers, and that repair has moved on. That was done almost entirely with in-house staff, and we saved quite a bit of money over replacing the entire bleachers. We swapped out all the hardware and all the wood, painted it ourselves, and replaced the fencing on it. That's the next step. And it will be completed and open to the public on May 4th is our game plan for that. The Pierce Park Dog Park, we're excited about that one. We started construction last week and it's moving forward. We anticipate about 4 more weeks, and we should have first new dog park in Palo Alto in about 25 years.
Very good.
Could I ask a question about that? No?
Yes, please.
Good, thank you. Darren, how many, what's the crew like that's working on that? How many people do we use and utilize?
This one's a contract running, so it's a contractor named LOSA. A construction that's doing the project, and it varies per day on how many people have got out. And when they're setting posts, I think I saw a 3-person crew the other day.
Okay.
Something like
and are they're on a timeline to be finished?
Yeah, in about 4 weeks we anticipate. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
You bet. And some of that is not necessarily them doing construction. Some of the delay is waiting for the materials to come in. So the amenities is usually one of the portions of our wait time. We ordered as soon as the money was available and the plan was approved, but sometimes there's a little wait associated with that. And by that I mean like drinking fountains, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so would we open before the amenities are here?
No, we'll wait till everything's
It's going to be all
installed.
done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A little update.
If I can continue on that just for 1 second. I assume there's some sort of communications plan to let dog owners and whatever, everybody know about that.
Yes.
I don't think we need to understand that now, but
Yeah, through our, gosh, almost a decade now of reaching out to dog owners, I've got a pretty good distribution
list.
Yeah, along with Howard Hoffman, who's been a great partner, and he's the president of the Palo Alto Dog Owners Association.
Okay.
So we rely on him quite a bit for spreading the word.
So I think we should have a celebration
I'd love that idea.
with dog biscuits.
That's a great idea.
For the commission members, your meeting, right?
Maybe.
Right, right.
Another project, this one is not a CSD-led project, but it definitely affects us. This is the Highway 101 Bike and Pedestrian Bridge project. This is at 65% design, was recently completed. They're just starting efforts on the 90% level design. They're working with Caltrans. They anticipate by the end of the year they'll have bid documents, so it can go out to bid. And then they were hesitant to give me an estimate on when they can start construction because there's a lot of variables. So hopefully I'll come back with that information shortly. The Baylands Boardwalk project. Yes.
Question about the bridge. I noticed that the other bridge is going up right now, the one north of Embarcadero, or north of the other?
The East Palo Alto Bridge.
Yeah, the East
coming
Palo
into the
Alto
shopping
Bridge is
center.
also going up. That one's going up real fast.
Yeah, I'm envious of how quickly they got that going. I can't speak to why ours was a little longer process, unfortunately. I'm sorry. We'll do everything we can to make it happen quickly. On that same note of why projects take a little longer is the next topic. That's the Baylands Boardwalk that we've been working on for quite some time. It's out for bid right now, which is good. However, we're still waiting on 2 permits. We got the 404 permit, which is a big and important one, but we need one from the water district and the regional water board, and that's a little challenging sometimes. So they're currently shooting to get that permit. Best case scenario, we'd go to council in June if we got the permit in time to go approval for the contract, and then start work September 1st, 2018, if everything lines up right. So we'll be pursuing that endeavor, and it's, again, contingent on permit acquisition. The closed trails at Foothills Park, I've been keeping you apprised of this one. We made some headway. The last challenge we had faced was the rerouted trail sections. Again, this is for Los Trancos and Costanoan trails up at Foothills Park. The rerouted section was too close to some wood rat middens. And so I went up and took measurements and sent photos to my trail consultant and said, do you think we could accommodate this, scooting over 35, 40 feet in different areas? And he said, yes, I'm confident we could do that. So we've got a new alignment, and we have got an appointment to go with planning and start our application process on Monday. And their guidance so far was, realistically, they think it's sometime in August we can go to council for approval. We have to go to the Planning Transportation Committee and the council, but August is the time frame. I think that will line up with our contractor being there and hopefully get to work on rerouting those trails. I'll know more after that meeting with planning, so at the next commission meeting I'll be glad to give you another update. And then lastly, my last update concerns the Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan. My last time here with council or commission, I gave a little presentation on that and gave a status update. One of the key and very positive bits of feedback we got back from the commission was you need to do some more outreach to people that aren't in your stakeholder group, which is very helpful. We created a special outreach, a 2-page thing that my rangers out in the field could come up to people and say, do you mind if I ask you a few questions relating to this plan we're working on? And in a small amount of time, 5 to 10, 15 minutes, they can get some pithy information back that's useful for the plan. So they did that at the Great Race event that was recently at the Baylands, and they're doing that kind of impromptu with different visitors stopping by. They have one more month of outreach that they're going to try to do, and that will involve reaching out. I think they've already gotten some windsurfers, but we haven't really gotten to that youth group that we talked about. And so that's next. We're primarily targeting, that'll be through the environmental volunteers, our own naturalist staff that work at the Lucy Evans Nature Center, and then through Save the Bay, where they bring out school groups and pull them aside and say, hey, we're really excited about this plan. Can we ask you about these 3 or 4 things? And try to get some of that good feedback to tie into the plan.
Could I ask a question, please? So what about the youth that aren't the natural users, who might not interface with with the Rangers and other people, can we get somehow into the schools for kids who didn't ever think they'd go to the Baylands, but if it turned out to be cool, they might go, and get some of their ideas?
Yeah, that's a good feedback, and I think to some degree, maybe not entirely, but to some degree, that happens through the outreach we do with Save the Bay. So they'll have a group, oftentimes those are not your regular park
Yeah.
visitors, right? They are part of a class that has to come out and do, and oftentimes when I would lead those programs, there were some first time in open space experiences. So to some degree, I hope we get some of that, and I'll ask the Rangers if they've got additional ideas.
That would be really good if we could, and maybe even through the high school science teachers at Palo and Gunn, they might be able to pass that out. And if you get nothing, then you get nothing. But if you get something, it could be really valuable.
Yeah, I'll give that a shot. Thank you. Lastly, on that same plan, the consultant has been working on piecing together some more chapters. These are goals and objectives, future planned projects, climate change and sea level rise, opportunities analysis and best management practices. And I anticipate June, I'll come to you with drafts of all those chapters, kind of the meat and the substance of the plan for your review and your feedback. And that's everything I have.
Just quick to add, tagging on to what Ann just said, there are environmental science classes at the high school, so that would be a good target group.
Excellent, thank you.
And you did say you had environmental volunteers helping collect or hand out or?
That's correct, and their new director's just been added as a stakeholder to the group.
Perfect.
David?
Thank you.
So the Los Troncos Trail, if it goes to council in August and gets approved, when can you start that? Can you work through the winter?
It's a good question. I probably need to defer to my trail contractor and see how long he thinks it would take. I'm hopeful that since he'll be here during that time period, that right after council approves it, he can get going and hopefully finish it before winter is my hope.
Yeah, that
but
would be
I'll
great.
find out more.
All right, and then the second question is there any more update on the 7.7 acres? The last time we talked, we were very, very close to getting that open, but they have to put a fence around the nursery. What's the status?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to come back to you next month with more information on that one. Kristen's helping me work through some logistics and consult with the city attorney's office and see what the next steps are. I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
Just a little bit more information. We had planned to go to council as an action for council to discuss the Buckeye Creek hydrology study as well as the 7.7 acres. And there was some question from the city attorney whether we should come and just bring it as an informational report in the packet to council or whether it needs to be an action. So we're working with the city attorney just to determine what the appropriate way to inform council is.
Are we done then?
I have one announcement or item under department report, and that is that Saturday, May 5th, is our 96th annual Mayfete Parade. You've probably received a couple of emails asking if you would like to participate as a VIP. I would really appreciate it if a couple of you attended. It's always nice to see familiar faces walking the parade route and supporting the parade. So if you would like to attend as a VIP, you get to walk with a group at the beginning of the parade, you get a t-shirt, you get some other goodies, and of course the prestige of walking in the parade. So just either let me know or let Stephanie Douglas know if you plan to be there. And also just for you, Commissioner Lemire, as the Palo Alto Recreation Foundation liaison, they're likely going to reach out to you to see if you will hold a banner or a banner in the parade on behalf of PARF. So
And what time is the parade?
it starts at 10 a.m.
Okay.
No pressure, just letting you know.
Keep selling that.
But he does have children of age that would appreciate the parade.
Well, and appreciate his presence in the parade.
Could I just say that this is an incredibly wonderful Palo Alto institution. It is a great parade, and everybody who hasn't had the experience or wants to have another experience should plan to go, because it really is one of the things that makes Palo Alto what Palo Alto is. And it's got a long tradition and a long history and a lot of sentiment and all of that. So thanks for all the staff is doing on it, because it's not an easy job to put on a parade.
Thank you. And I also wanted to mention, too, that every year we have a different theme. And this year the theme is Children of the World, to celebrate the diversity of Palo Alto. And our parade marshal is Neighbors Abroad. They're the organization that helps with our sister cities. So we were hoping to have someone from one of our sister cities here in town, but they happen to be leaving the day before the parade, so they won't be there. But I hope you can make it.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to note is historically, Parks and Rec has had the most people marching, more than other commissions. So
Good.
if you can make it, please make it. It's a good time. It's worth your time. It's an enjoyable thing.
Last thing I would add is, last year I did walk in it with Keith and brought my son. We had a great time. But also, a couple years ago, I walked with my son and nephew, and we pulled a wagon in the unaffiliated section. And so if people, I don't know if the Recreation Foundation widely expresses that or if that's known, but it was actually a really neat experience that you can participate in the parade without being affiliated with a certain school or a certain other group, and it was pretty neat to be able to do that as well.
I think you got lots of help there on that subject, Kristen. I hope everybody attends. It sounds great. Are there any other comments, or should we move on to the next agenda item? The next agenda item would be the approval of the minutes. Can I have a motion or a comment on the minutes? Does this mean that nobody read all 53 pages of the minutes? I mean, 53 pages of minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, David. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jeff. So everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The minutes are, approval of the minutes is passed.
Chair, I probably should abstain since I wasn't here last time.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 approvers and
Great.
and one abstainer, and that we still have a quorum to vote. So thank you, Ann. Good point. Next item on the agenda, we're lucky enough to have Roger Smith, the co-founder of Friends of the Palo Alto Parks, to speak with us about Friends of the Palo Alto Parks, help us understand what their ambitions are and some of their background. So welcome, Roger. We are very, very pleased to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and I'd like to start by thanking each of you for serving, because it's really neat that we do that in our city. And we started the Friends of the Palo Alto Parks in 2005, and our goals are fairly simple here. It's to provide funding to enrich, enhance, and beautify the Palo Alto parks. Number 2 is to foster greater public awareness and appreciation and ownership of our parks. 3 is to raise funds to assist in purchasing additional parkland and open space. One of the premises when we started the organization is that the city would never have all the money they would like to have to do what we would like to do in our parks. We're a small group. We have 8 board members. The other 7 are our president, Susan Beal, Richard Hackman, Ed Selden, Jenny Smith, Linda Selden, and Lee Levy, who's a former mayor. I think many of you might know him. We have an advisory board of Jadish Bashi, Alan Brown of Vance Brown and Sons, John and Christine Irving, Barbara Gross, David McKenzie, Jeff Trom, and Alenka Villarreal. We do several things. Again, we're not a big group, but one of the things we've been working on is Color Our Parks, where we work on the flower beds at Rinconada and also have done work over at Lucy Stern Community Center. We work to help get funding for the Rastadero Preserve for the demonstration things there. We've worked hard to get benches in many of our parks. We also help out Bold Park Garden Center. We work closely with the Kiwanis Club to help Darren's group to help work on the parks, and recently have done Bowden Park and Hoover Park. We were involved with Bike Palo Alto that stopped at a couple of our parks, and we have a little tree display at Briones Park, and we have volunteered to help out with the new golf course on the native plants. So partnering with with the city on our major parks, we not only raise funds, but one of the things that we bring to the table is, we sort of say our special sauce is that we lease the property from the city, and that gives us the opportunity to bring in our own contractors and get in-kind donations. So because of that, we can do things faster and many times less expensive than the city could. We've been involved in 3 major projects, Heritage Park, Lytton Plaza, the Magical Bridge, and a little bit of history of each of these. Each of these projects had a champion and a small working group. Jadish Bashi and Jeff Trom, who were on our board at that time, had the idea for the playground at Heritage Park and worked with Mayor Yoriko to get that moving along. Then we were fortunate to have some neighbors, John and Christine Irving, who live right on the park, to step up to head up the building of that park. And interesting enough, as we all know, there's different parts of the community. Christine Irving has been president of maybe 5 or 6 different organizations. She had never been to a city council meeting, so she came to talk about the Heritage Park. So we had very few, several contractors that gave us advice on the park. And those of you that have been there, there's a beautiful dolphin, and Tig Tarleton donated that in honor of his daughter who died. It's like the one in Ireland. And what was interesting there is the funding came primarily from the neighborhood, and then Summerhill Homes, who built out that area, really donated a fair amount of money. And so the shepherds of that park are the Irvings. So they live there and they watch it and really take ownership of it. The next major project that we did was Lytton Plaza. And the idea came from Lee Levy, who's big into fountains. And he was joined by Roxy Rapp and to get this thing cooking. And then Lee joined our board. Barbara Gross, who at that time ran the Garden Court Hotel, became the head of the working group. And we formed a founders group who committed at least $10,000 to the project. And there's a really nice plaque right there on the wall of Pizza My Heart showing the founders group. I was by there today, and it's sort of sad that 8 of these folks are no longer with us. And that's Warren Theuts, John Santana, Dale Denson, Jack Rominger, John Childress, Sam Webster, and Leonard Ely. And the reason I bring this up, these, if you knew these people, they were really pillars of our community, and you could always tap them on the shoulder and they'd take out their checkbook. So one of our goals, but I think in the city in general, we have to replace them with other people that may not have worked here in town, but a lot of folks live here. And we had some very large donations from Lee Levy, Roxy Rapp, and Chop Keenan. The major project that we're best known for is the Magical Bridge. And the inspiration of that came from Olenka Villarreal, who had a disabled daughter, and she was having to drive a long ways to find playgrounds for her. And she joined our board and literally worked tirelessly for many years to complete this wonderful project. We were able to get a lead gift from Dick Perry at the Perry Foundation of $1 million. And Dick Perry sits behind me at football games at Stanford. And he says this to me many times: the Magical Bridge ground is the best thing to happen in Palo Alto. So, and this is a guy who gave, what, $25 million to the school to build a gym, right? But Alinka and her group worked very hard, and Pat Burt, who was on the council at that time, became a champion and helped us work through the city. And Alinka's daughter came up with the Magical Bridge, and those of you that remember, it was a bridge that went over to the tennis courts, the 3 tennis courts there, and she said that land is a magical bridge. And what was neat about that is we made use of land that was sitting there just not being used. And we raised over $4 million for that project with some very big gifts. And if you have time, or if you've never been there, go sometime, because it is so popular. I mean, it is just really, really an interesting program. Alinka has gone on and taken the model to build magical bridge parks in several communities. I think one in Redwood City, I think, may be coming up. So one of the things we really bring to the table is that we are a small group again, is that we do have the 501c, and it's an excellent vehicle to fund various projects. We now hold the following funds for Bull Park Flower Project, Heritage Park, the Lawn Bowling Fund, Lytton Plaza, Magical Bridge, and the Palo Alto Dog Owners Association. So we feel that the 501c can be used to help fund various projects as we go in the future. And I would like us all to work together that anytime we're doing a project, that if there's not enough money, or they need a little more money, that we put our heads together and see how we might tap the neighbors or whoever the users are. And Ann, I like your idea of once we get a park refurbished, for instance, that we have a celebration, because it usually has been closed, and so that would be. So, Don, that's my report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Roger. I'm sure there are some comments and questions. I'll start, David, at your end.
Thank you very much for that update. My favorite park is that Magical Bridge, and I go by it every day from South Palo Alto, so it's fantastic, and I can't thank you enough for helping out with that. And almost every meeting I bring up the AT&T property next to Boulware Park, and I'm hoping that someday, some way, we will try to be able to purchase that and make it a part of Boulware and somehow work it into that Fry's property next door. So anything that we can do to push that, that's my goal.
David, you know, I had thought of that also, and one of the nice part about that, if we could close off that street, that would give us a lot more property there. So I was thinking maybe we should, and I would be happy to start a little fund at the Friends of the Park for that project, just so we have a fund if we start talking to people who might have an interest in putting some money in that. And
Yes, thank you.
Well, I'm pretty excited to hear this, Roger. It's pretty amazing what you all have done since the year 2000. I was looking at the website while I was hearing you talk, and the projects are wonderful and certainly much needed. I especially liked what you said about some of the founders of Lytton Plaza and supporters who aren't with us anymore, kind of remembering all the people who years ago in Palo Alto did so much to think about the future of the city with parks and Foothill Park, you know, all of that we know. And I think it's going to be really important for you to continue on to identify new donors and new people. And if there's any way that we can help you with that, I think that's really critical. So thank you so much for everything that you've done. I really appreciate it.
And thank you very much. It reminds me, we had a celebration, I can't remember how many years ago, maybe 10 or so, at Foothill Park. I think it was one of the anniversaries. And one of the Lee brothers got up and explained about what happened there. And the story that he told, I presume is true, that Dr. Lee came home and said, "Helen, I'm going to sell the property." And she says, "Russell, that's fine. You can sell your half of the property, but not my half." And he said, "Helen, what's your half?" And she said, "Every other inch
So just to add to that, I'm really hopeful that this group continues to get really good publicity, and people who would like to contribute to Palo Alto are able to find you, and that we all as a group make it easy for people to contribute.
Thank you, Ann, I agree. Jeff?
I really appreciate the opportunity to learn about the wonderful things that your organization has done for the community. It's quite laudable and very impressive. I agree, certainly we'll never have enough money to fund all of the wonderful ideas that we have to enrich our community and our parks and recreation system. And we have a new master plan which has just been adopted, which is an aspirational document with great ideas to move forward with in the next 25 years, and certainly hope that we can continue to work together to make some of these ideas into realities. So thank you very much.
Jeff, I believe that they have now all been delivered copies of the master plan.
An excellent investment. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks again. You've done so much for the city. When I go to Heritage Park, it's such a beautiful park and makes that neighborhood so much more livable, so much more attractive. If that was just filled with houses, then the neighborhood would not be the same. So we appreciate that. And Jeff mentioned master plan. We have so many things, so many things that the city will not be able to fund. And so having a charity that the public can donate to is going to be very important. What can we do to help you raise funds or get publicity? Is it?
If you don't mind, I'll just mention Heritage Park. One of the things that really warmed my heart is John and Christine had the idea to get the children from the low-cost housing, and they went over and were able to put their handprints on the wall, and that's really neat. And that's a busy park. I was by there the other day. I'm not certain what we do. I would say that we might start with, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but it maybe falls into Darren and Public Works. If we're going to redo a park, and there may be sort of the basics, but it'd be nice to add on, let's say, some things which not in the budget, that we might be able to then work together to say, okay, and go around the neighborhood. Because one of the things that we haven't accomplished that I always wanted to, I had the dream of every park would have some shepherds in it. And like the three major ones we have, the people that are either close by, use it, or whatever. But, so I think that might be one. And so that's pretty nebulous, but I think that would be a start. So anytime there's money to be had, if there's not enough, that we work together on.
One of my concerns is that Friends of Palo Alto Park is well known by word of mouth. And especially with so many new people coming in, I think there's a big chunk of the city who doesn't even know that the Friends of Palo Alto Parks exists. And so what can we do to get people more knowledgeable about Friends of Palo Alto Park and more likely to give money to you?
Well, to date, we've been very project-oriented. And clearly, Magical Bridge, that's a pretty easy sell because, you have little kids. Lytton Plaza was more downtown oriented. And so that would something we'd have to all think about. Is there a possibility of just having a fund? And I think it's worthwhile. And the property and I always mispronounce, Bulware Park is just a classic one. And I believe that's in the city somewhere, getting the subdivision done. And that's a classic one. The other one that it really intrigues me, there's a little park, and I can't remember the name of it, at Grant and Ash Street. It's a little pocket park. And that is, we need collectively to figure out how we have more pocket parks. And again, I don't know all the details, but I think some of the developers have gotten by putting a bench somewhere. And we really need some space, some greenness. So that might be another area that we could work together. But I think, it's easy to say there's just so much wealth in town. And there's a lot 2 blocks from me on Bryant Street that went on the market for $17 million the other day. And the realtor said that they thought it was underpriced, and it sold in 2 days. So I don't know who sold it, but that gives you some idea there's a fair amount of money in town. And I think through Magical Bridge, we were able to tap into some of that money.
Yeah, it's also hard for us though, because that same prices is what we have to pay if we want to buy parkland. So it cuts on both sides. So, but anyway, thanks again. You've done such a good job for the city. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Roger, I just want to thank you for your service, your generosity, your initiative, your willingness to give to the city and to the community. And I think, echoing what Ann said about the people who, how you mentioned the people who've passed that had worked with Lytton Plaza, but I think it's incumbent upon us, and especially I look at me who has a 6-year-old, but finding the people of the next generation, so to speak, who can take some of these projects on, or who want to invest in this community and who live here now and who really, see this as our home. And for what you've done and what you've done with the Friends of Palo Alto Parks, I think it's really a great example. And, whether it's us continuing to talk about it with our peer group, or if I'm at the elementary school or whatever it is, but whatever we can do as a commission to spread the word, but it's also finding that generation who is coming up and who has the 6-year-olds and the 8-year-olds and the kids in elementary school and have made that decision to be part of Palo Alto. And it's, it is about service. And so I just want to thank you for all that you've done, because it's tremendous. And we need more people like you, and we need to, be able to tap into that and find that. So again, thank you so much.
Well, I thank you very much. I think also that we have a talent, we have a lot of wealth, we have a talent pool that if we wanted to be critical, I'm not sure the city collectively has reached out and tapped that. And so we were able to do that on specific projects, like the contractors and people, because everybody's got a list of their friends, but the expertise. And I go to council meetings every once in a while, and I can't believe all the stuff that gets dumped on staff. So I think we have, and now I'm very much editorializing here, I think we have people in the community that might step forward if asked and not be paid as a consultant, but just as a working group, because there is so much talent. And also there's guys like me that are getting older that might have some time too.
Thank you, Roger. I would like to ask if Kristen or Darren have any questions they'd like to ask or any interaction I'd like with Roger.
I would. Mainly just an acknowledgement. I've known Roger for a long time, and he calls me frequently, almost always to offer help. I just really appreciate that. Not only is he the eyes and the ears, and that goes for the whole Friends organization, they'll call me and say, hey, just to let you know, there's a swing that looks like it needs some attention. Can you get to it? Very, very appreciative of that and those generous offers, so thank you so much.
I might mention too that Darren almost always gets back to you within a day on it. Things that I think the last one I was bothering you about is out at Brioni Park, the water fountain was shooting up. You couldn't get a drink. And he said, I'll have our guys look at it on Monday. And that's the kind of thing that if we all work together, if we could get these shepherds going that we have, because I'm sure you get a lot of problems, but if we had a shepherd in each park, that would really be neat.
So I think, number one, I'd just simply like to say thank you to Roger and the whole Friends of Palo Alto Parks. But I feel like my job, if I could just do it, would be to create a word cloud just out in space from all the comments that were made and some words that were used and words that I think are implied. The concept of shepherds and funding and help and partnership. Partnership is really key in all that. And the whole idea of next generation and the whole idea of talent and throw in pocket parks and all of that for me adds up to passion. And as much as anything, I think thanking you and the organization for the passion that you represent And the challenge for us is to take advantage and leverage that passion with the rest of the community. And I will speak for the commission and say we will find a way to leverage that passion, and thank you for it.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be able to be here.
Were you going to lead a small applause?
I would, but nobody was following me, so.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you very much for your time. I think we should proceed with the golf course just in case, so we're allowing time for the tennis people.
So I'll introduce this item, and I asked Lam to join us today. Lam Do is our superintendent of parks, golf, and open space. I wasn't sure about the open space. And as you know, we recently had council approve our new contract with the operator who will be managing the golf course, our new cafe/restaurant at the golf course, the maintenance, and it's really an exciting time for us with the golf course being completed and just kicking off with a brand new operator, and we're really excited about it. So I asked Lam to come and just share with you some of the details of the new course and the new operator and what you can expect.
Welcome, Lam.
Thank you, Chairman Dugo and members of the Commission. I'd like to present to you this evening our new Baylands Golf Links. In conjunction with that, our agreement and partnership with OB Sports, our new golf course operator. So I want to start with some background information on the course, and then I'll lead into what the features of the new golf course, and then also discuss the RFP process and how we came about selecting our golf management company, OB Sports, and the two agreements that we now have with them. We have a course management agreement with them, and we also have a license with them for them to provide food provisions of food and beverage at the restaurant and on the course. Thank you. This year, I present to you, this is our new course, the Baylands Golf Links. It is a link-style course with native vegetation areas throughout the course. And I'll speak of what makes this course unique in a second here, but let me go back to what we were before. And what we were before was the Palo Alto Municipal Golf Course. A little bit back on history on the Palo Alto Golf Course. It was built in 1956, consisting of 160 acres in the Baylands. It remained in operations for 60 years through 2016. There were some renovations in regards to irrigation systems in between those 60 years, but the course remained primarily the same. It was a flat up and down course located in the Baylands. One of the impetus of the city deciding to renovate the course is the adjacent project of the San Francisco Creek Levee expansion, which was going to expand its footprint into the golf course by 7.4 acres. So the city and council decided to fully renovate the course because of the loss of the 7.4 acres. At the same time, the city also decided to dedicate 10.5 acres aside for future recreation use. That in itself reduced the golf course, the Baylands Golf Links course, down to about 143 acres. So in May of 2016, the city issued, let me go back a little bit here, a few more pictures. In May of 2016, the city issued a contract with Wadsworth Golf Construction to begin the process of fully redesigning and renovating the course, all 18 holes. Construction began with demolition of the old course, also down to removal of the prior irrigation, installing new drainage, and a whole new irrigation system in addition to that. So from there, the Wadsworth Golf further developed after they had the irrigation system in and underlaid under the course. The course was further developed. The course imported over 400 cubic yards of dirt to create contours, which you'll later see provides us with the link-style course. Much of the importation of the 400 cubic yards came from development at Stanford University, which was an opportunity for the city to take advantage of that because we needed the dirt ourselves. So they needed to offload dirt, and so we worked out a deal with them to accept their dirt. So from there, we started further developing, and you can see in this picture here, the course is still more taking shape as a course. You can see tees being developed, greens being shaped and formed. You can see new cart paths having been put in. In addition to that, we opted to replace the old and no longer relevant by location restroom. So that restroom was removed, and we installed a new restroom in a location based on the new layout that could be accessible by 3 different golf holes. So this provides multiple opportunities for users to have essentially a pit stop during their round of play. So. And then what we eventually came with is our new Baylands Golf Links course. So this is a link-style course specifically designed by Forrest Richardson, taking advantage of being adjacent to the Baylands. Link-style courses, for those of you familiar, are typical that you see in Europe, in which they kind of take in natural elements and land formations. So we've sort of created a design similar to that. We've added more bunkers. We now have rolling fairways instead of a flat, long fairways. And we also have now windy conditions, which we had before, but now I'm going to say it's even more windier because we have fewer trees at this point. So all these features make it more unique towards a link-style course. Okay, so some features that we have on this new course I'd like to discuss with you is what we have are is a 40% reduction in the prior managed turf, which we've converted what was previously managed turf to native vegetation areas to complement the link style, but it also helps us in regards to cost of irrigation. So another feature of this course is the selection of paspalum turf grass, which is very tolerant of salinity, so which allows us to switch from previously blending both recycled and potable water to now what we think will be mostly and almost up to 100% recycled water in the fairways. The greens will still need to be potable water just because it's a different type of grass. It's a bent grass. However, most of the golf courses, the fairways, and that's what's going to be mostly irrigated with recycled water. So there's that. We've also selected grasses that are more appropriate for the location as well. In addition to that, now with the importation of the 400 yards of cubic yards of dirt, is we now have contours and elevated views on the course. So there are actually a couple holes where you can see parts of the southern San Francisco Bay, which, these elevated views were not available to the course before. So in general, the course was raised anywhere between a foot to up to 13 feet, I believe. So depending on which location you're at. And with that, we also have more features that continue on. And with that, we also selected a company to manage the golf course, and that's OB Sports. Something about OB Sports is that they are a unique golf operator in that they operate all types of golf courses, from private courses to daily fee courses to public courses. They operate in a boutique style where they actually present different themes for the courses that they manage, and they place the course owner and the branding of what the course owner would like before their branding. So it's kind of a company that offers a boutique style, which is something that the city desired. So if I could talk to you about next is the RFP process and how we came about selecting OB Sports. We submitted requests for proposals for either full course management or a full course lease. And this process was intended to change the operating model of the golf course. Previously, our golf course operating model operated with different vendors providing different services. We had Brad Lazarus operating the golf shop and providing professional services to manage the golf course play. We had a different restaurant operator, and we had a different golf course management company. So the city wanted to, with this golf course, to desired the operations of one company for cohesiveness. We received 5 course management proposals. We did not receive any full course lease proposals. And when we assessed the proposals for proposal, costs, management style, based on interviews and based on references, we came to the selection of OB Sports as our preferred vendor, and then from there we entered negotiations with them. The city actually modified their initial proposal. The initial proposal was a strict fee-for-service management model in which they asked the city for a management fee, and in return they would manage the golf course, where the city would absorb the expenditures and also receive all revenues. The city went back to OB Sports and negotiated them a different structure, where now it will still be a fee for service, but on top of that, they will be receiving a set operating expense in which they have to match that operating expense. This provided the city and the operator with some risk and reward on both parties, where they need to operate to the set budget that the city has set for them and yet still attain the revenues. So the city was comfortable in this type of model and presented that, and they worked with us to come up with an agreement. So, in regards to the structure of our agreement with them, we actually ended up with 2 different agreements. We ended up with a management agreement where they would operate the golf shop on the city's behalf. They would also operate the driving range, operate the golf course as well, and maintain the course. A separate agreement with them is to lease to them food and beverage services. This has to do with the structure of how we are funding the construction of the golf course through bond financing and providing the city with flexibility in the future should we want to modify our operating structure or go with another company down the line. By having 2 different contracts, agreements, we get some flexibility in that. And so that's why we have 2 separate agreements with them. But ultimately, the city does get one cohesive service because it's one company providing all the services. So. The intent of the benefits of that, of course, has to do with the ultimate play experience that one receives coming to the course. We want it to be seamless, where one comes and understands from when they check in at the golf shop to when they play the course, or if they practice in advance, or if they want to grab a snack in advance of getting onto the course, that it's one service provider understanding and collectively providing one product. Same with if we were to have a tournament. Tournament coordination with food and beverage is a challenge. We hope that this model, in which they are both the operator and of both the course and of food and beverage, that same thing, there could be a coordination of the 2. We have selected OB Sports for other desires as well. There are some loyalty programs that they want to introduce as well. The loyalty program that they have has been successful in other courses that they manage. And this is something that we haven't had before. We've had discounts before for select play at our course, but we haven't had a loyalty program, and we hope that this loyalty program is something that is going to grow as players participate in the course and realize the benefits of it. So, in addition to that, one other change that we've had from prior operations is we're also introducing dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing some of you may be familiar with that model in the airline industry or the hotel industry. So we, working with OB Sports, have developed three-tiered system pricing, pricing that is for green fees that have, with residents receiving the lowest rates. Next would be a second tier of Bay Area residents, and then third would be visitors from out of town or business play. Within the structure of each of those three tiers, there's also dynamic pricing, which would fluctuate based on the demand and what the T-sheet for the day that's being reserved looks like. And it's going back to similar to an airline model or a hotel model, it rewards those that reserve or book their tee times early. So, with the course now complete, we are going to move towards. We are now working with OB Sports, who has taken over operations, with the exception of the restaurant, last week upon council's approval of their agreements. The reason they have not taken over the restaurant yet is because the current operator does have some commitments of banquets that they've already accepted, so their lease will end at end of this month, at which time OB Sports will also take over the restaurant. So from there, OB Sports is now busy preparing for our grand opening, which we plan to have Saturday, May 26th, which is Memorial Day weekend. So between now and then, it gives them about a month to prepare the course. They're making some changes as well to both the golf shop and the restaurant. These are some remodels, and which to perhaps give the in essence, bring in a new change to the course. As most of you are aware, Brad Lazar's operated the golf course previously for the city for 36 years, and the restaurant has been leased for as long as I can remember. So with OB Sports coming on board, they are doing some remodel as well. With the grand opening about a month away, we also plan on having some pre-opening events where we're going to have some special invite play, some VIP play. We're also going to invite the public to tour the course as well. We also want to have some media coverage in this leading up to the golf course grand opening day, and then upon grand opening, we would have sort of a festival to kick off and open the course as well. So. With that, I think before I go to question and answers, I do want to acknowledge those that have gotten us here. I mean, this has been a long process. It's been, 6 years in the making, and city staff throughout the city have helped us get to where we are, from council to the JPA to the commission itself. We've our planning commission. We've had the architectural review board, staff from the city manager's office, planning, community environment, community services staff, public works, our attorney's office, and also administrative service have all been contributed to this project and bring it to where we are today. And so we're all looking forward to it in about just right over a month to opening the course. So from there, I have if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Jeff, I'll start at your end.
I appreciate all the work that everyone put into this. The golf course from these pictures looks beautiful, and excited to see it when it opens. I do have a couple quick questions. One is, so if I understand it, there's an incentive. It's fee for service, but there's also some revenue marks for them to hit that provide, whether it's bonuses or, in order for the city to recoup the right amount of money. Is that correct?
That is correct. There is a set expense budget, which they are tasked with managing too. In addition to that, there is a set revenue anticipation or expectation. The city will receive all the revenues up to the budgeted amount. Anything that's beyond the budgeted amount would be a revenue share. So the incentive for OB Sports to both manage at or under the expense budget, yet still bringing in more than the anticipated revenue, is that anything above the anticipated revenue, they would receive 20% of.
Okay, great, thank you. And then as far as the pricing goes, how does the pricing compare to what the golf course was? I know the golf course has now changed, but how does it compare to what it was, as well as compare to other area golf courses that are public courses?
Yes. A comparison is difficult at this point. The reason is the pricing is based on not only the cost to operate the course, but also the player experience. We feel that the player experience of this new links course, which does not exist in the area, will be much different, much more desirable. So based on those two factors, comparison would not be an exact comparison, but in regards to dollars, the fee range from before, and I do have to sort of preface this, is that our fee range before was steeply discounted because we had a modified course, and it was a modified course for several years. We also lost a lot of customers during that time, so we really discounted our course to the point where our green fees, which were in the $40 range, down to the high 20s and low 30s. So with the reopening, the resident fees would have a range of between, on a weekday, between $40 and $60, and then on a weekend, between $52 and $80, and that's where the dynamic pricing comes into play. But once again, I do want to emphasize that a hard dollar comparison probably would not be a direct comparison at this point.
And then as far as the rounds projection that we've made, how does that, how did we reach that conclusion? And then what number of rounds were being played in the past at the course?
Yes. I'll start with the number of rounds being played at the course. Peak at the course was about 90,000 rounds. Now keep in mind that was during the height of the golf boom, being in the early 2000s. Leading up to when there was discussions that the course would be modified, so this would be around 2011, 2012, 2013, we were in the range of about 75,000 rounds. I'm not exact on the figures at this right now. And then up until when we closed the course in 2016, we were down to 32 or 36,000 rounds when we closed in 2016. In regards to the projections of how we arrived at the projections of this new golf course, the city worked with the National Golf Foundation to prepare performers back in 2012. We asked them to update their projections in 2016 with the anticipation of the new course. And then we further refined that figure with both a golf consultant from Golf Convergence, Jim Keegan, and also we worked with OB Sports to further refine the figures. So the city has worked with 2 consulting firms and the operator to determine what we think the golf course will play. The rounds will start off lower than what we think it will sustain. We think it'll take about 2 years, maybe 3 years to sustain its full operating numbers, and those range anywhere between the 62 to 66,000 rounds estimate.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Keith?
Thank you. The single operator, I thought that was a very good decision. I think that'll simplify a lot of the operations. I also thought the dynamic pricing, that's a good route to go down. Who will be setting the rates for the dynamic pricing? Is that a city decision or is that an OB?
OB Sports uses, for simplified terms, an algorithm, but it's an algorithm that's supported by golf data. And they will be using golf statistics as well to set the dynamic pricing within the range that the city sets. The city obviously has worked out with OB Sports that we will review that as well to see how that goes. And we do have the opportunity to work with their management as well to adjust the algorithm that determines these pricing.
Before the construction, did we have many open rounds where someone wasn't on the course? Or was it pretty much sold out?
Before construction, we had a lot of open slots. Weekends, we had good amount of golf play, but the course struggled during the week. And that would be Monday through Thursday was when we struggled, and we struggled. We even had rounds open in the morning as well, which typically would be a desirable play time, but we struggled in the mornings, and midday was a struggle, so we were not anywhere near capacity.
Well, dynamic pricing should help that, I would assume.
We hope it does. It is a shift in the golf industry, but that's a shift that we think that is going to support this golf course.
You also mentioned the reason for the 2 contracts had something to do with the bonds. I was confused about that.
Yes. The city is financing construction of this golf course to pay back the general fund with 30-year bonds. And with 30-year bonds, depending on whether one goes with taxable or non-taxable bonds, there are certain restrictions on what contract stipulations there may be made, whether it has to do with compensation such as based on gross revenue, based on net revenue, or flat rate compensation. So there are multiple factors that are involved. The city has opted for the most flexibility, in which we have opted to go with taxable bonds and 2 separate agreements. The 2 agreements that we have in place right now are for 39 months with opportunities to mutually renew for additional 3 years, and then also an opportunity for a second mutual renewal for another 3 years. So that could be up to 9 years and 3 months. If it's mutual on both sides. Should it not, during that time, not be mutual with the flexibility of how the city sets up our agreements, we also thinking of the 30-year bond life and how we want to manage the course down the line.
Okay. And I guess the only other thing is the restaurant. I mean, in the past, the restaurant really was below par, no pun intended. Sorry, I couldn't resist. And I'm glad to hear that they're doing some remodeling before they're opening, but it's still, I don't imagine it's a major remodel. I think they're...
It is not a major remodel for several reasons. Pretty much the full construction budget was focused on the golf course itself and the practice areas and bumping out the driving range. The golf course construction budget did not include upgrades to the clubhouse facilities, being the golf shop and the restaurant. So that is, like you are inquiring, right? It's not a major upgrade. Second to that also is that if we were to pursue a major upgrade of the restaurant, it would further push out when the restaurant would come into operations, which would not match when we open our golf course.
Yeah. I think there's so much room for improvement, especially with the lunch crowd down there. There's so many offices nearby. I think in the long run, we really need to improve that restaurant. And it's a lost opportunity, both a lost opportunity for revenue, but also a lost opportunity just for a community asset. It's a great location. There's not a lot of competition down there. So I really would encourage to do what we can to down the road improve the restaurant.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
Well, I know this project has been a major undertaking, and must be very excited and relieved to be getting close to the finish line here. So congratulations on all the hard work.
On behalf of my colleagues, thank you.
Looks like it's paying off richly. I have a few questions. Regarding the dynamic pricing, is this used at other courses now, or is this a new undertaking for us?
It's a new undertaking for us. It is not used by many golf courses at all. Actually, within this region, I'm not aware of any courses that does dynamic pricing.
Yeah, and how about for the vendor?
They have one course.
They have one course, okay. Are the reservations tiered in any manner? Is priority given to residents, for example?
Yes, the tee time reservations are tiered, and it's the thought behind that is it's tiered actually to give priority to those that are making travel arrangements coming to the golf course. So those that are paying the highest tier rate would be the ones that have the most advanced tee time reservation for two reasons. They're paying the highest rate, and they are also making travel arrangements. The thought is that residents would be paying the lower rate, and residents could have more flexibility in what tee times that they play. So it's actually the most advanced tee time goes to the outside visitor.
Could you provide more details on that? How much earlier can an out-of-town
Yes.
golfer make a reservation than a resident, for example?
The out-of-town paying the highest tier can make reservations up to 60 days in advance. I don't know offhand right now what the resident is. I believe the residence was about 2 weeks.
And has the local golf community been consulted in making this decision?
I don't think we've heard. It's possible, but it has not been expressed to us formally. I think there is an understanding that with dynamic pricing, there's also this aspect of dynamic pricing in there.
So technically, a resident could make a reservation at the out-of-town rate, at the out-of-town date and out-of-town rate. And is there further tiering between Bay Area residents and Palo Alto residents?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Sorry. So there's the non-resident, there's the Bay Area resident, and the Palo Alto resident. Does the non-resident get the earliest time, then Bay Area, then Palo Alto, or is it just two steps?
No, the tee times are also, it's three tiers as well, along with the rate structure.
I'd be interested in getting more details on what's planned on that at some point.
Yes.
Are juniors able to make reservations as well at their reduced rate, or is it just a walk-up kind of availability for juniors? What's the planning there?
No, the juniors also will be able to make the reservations in advance as well. They're not expected to, because they're paying the junior rate, to have no lead advance.
And their window would be the same as Palo Alto residents?
That's correct.
Okay, and there's no distinction on a rate for resident juniors versus non-resident juniors?
No, there is not.
Okay. And then I have a couple of naive questions as a non-golfer. What is the replay rate?
Yes, some golfers prefer to play 2 rounds in a day. I mean, it's a monumental task in my opinion, but it's not uncommon. And so if you wanted to play another 18 holes, and some people still, they pay the replay rate, but they may not finish the second round, and which, it's understandable, but it is, at all golf courses, there is a replay rate typically.
Okay. And finally, are the carts electric?
Yes, the carts are electric.
Thank you.
It's a good thing.
We're Palo Alto.
Yeah, I prefaced it as one of the naive questions, but thank you.
Okay.
They would be solar cards.
Ann?
I have a lot of questions. I'm really happy to hear the presentation. Thank you very much. And just to say, like everybody else has, I know how hard and how long we've been working on this, so it's really exciting to get it close to the finish line. Where are the golf courses in California that this group operates?
Locally here, they operate the golf club at Moffett.
Okay.
And then also they in Southern California, they operate another golf course. Overall, it's 55 courses throughout the country.
And have we compared the rates for residents to the rate sheet that's in this presentation to Mountain View specifically?
We did do a rate survey, yes. And if you give me a few minutes, I can go back and check the rates.
That's okay. I was just switching back and forth,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to, because we're considerably higher for people who play golf a lot and people who just want to play, we're probably okay. I'm just worried about that, and since you brought up the part about the non-resident and the resident, it feels like it's backwards. It feels like Palo Alto residents, just from my perspective, should have priority.
The impetus for the opposite is that We do have the possibility that the tee sheet would be completely filled up way in advance with resident play. And I think we are trying to balance both a revenue model and a service model. The golf course has in the past broken even or just slightly was in the black or slightly in the red. So it's balancing revenues and expenses is difficult in operating a golf course, and so we need to ensure that we hit our revenue targets, and part of hitting the revenue targets is ensuring that we do offer the course to play from outside visitors who, if indirectly by paying a higher fee, contribute towards us being able to achieve our revenue targets. So it's a trade-off. I think it's maybe from a perspective of residents, maybe not as desirable, but I think what we offer our residents is a fee that is unmatched. Residents are paying the lowest fee here, so.
Well, I think that it's something, the pricing is something to watch for, and I'm sure that you and the vendor will be doing that because everybody needs to make this work and cover their costs and all of that. So I wanted to switch to the golf clubs, the clubs that we have now at the Muni or at the Baylands. So the senior men's and the men's club and the women's 9-hole, and what else is there?
And there's also a women's club. So there's a Wednesday club and a Thursday club.
And how are they feeling about all of this?
So the clubs are all have desires to return. During the past 2 years, they've had to play at other courses. They've contacted me asking to be able to come back, and we do want to welcome them back. I've worked with OB Sports to bring them back as well. OB Sports, I've informed the golf clubs that once OB Sports has established operations about a month in, maybe 2 months in, that we could then integrate the clubs returning. So the OB Sports, as they ramp up with their staffing, they anticipate having a general manager in place in any day now, and the discussions can then soon begin between OB Sports and the clubs to plan on their return.
I see. And First Tee, will First Tee continue on?
Yes, the First Tee of Silicon Valley, we've committed to supporting that program, and they're actually going to be here this summer, offering their programs on Wednesdays. And then they've also discussed with us other opportunities, and OB Sports is also supportive of the program.
Good, and then there's one other program from East Palo Alto that we've supported in the past. That's Bob Hoover's junior golf program that has really graduated a lot of kids, and they've gone on to scholarships and all of that. And so I'm hopeful that if Bob wants to continue, that's in the works as well.
We have not heard from Bob, but if Bob would like to contact us, I'd be more than happy to discuss with him and with the city and with OB Sports. I mean, it's.
And then just one more thing. Along those lines, Brad Lazaris, full disclosure, has been a longtime friend of mine, and I have worked with him very closely on golf tournaments in the past, senior tournaments, junior tournaments, and all of that. And he has an amazing reputation in the golf world, and so I'm hopeful that there's something that we all can do to kind of thank him and acknowledge him for, and this is probably not the right time, but for for everything he's done for the city and for the golf program, for junior golf, for senior golf, and just generally golf.
Yes. Brad's 36 years operating the golf shop on behalf of the city. It's estimated that Brad had 5 million golfers during that time. And in regards to developing a youth in the area, he worked with 18 golf professionals during this time as well, teaching youth. So he's made a major contribution to the community. We do want to recognize him, and we're aware of that. And that's something that will be forthcoming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
David?
You've answered a couple of my questions already. Thank you. The one question is, there's with the water treatment plant, we have a tremendous amount of water going straight into the bay over near the airport runway. Is that water, since the trees and the plants can now handle more saline water, is it possible to take that water and move it over to the golf course so that there's less going into the bay, directly into the bay?
The opportunity to make use of 100% recycled water exists almost throughout the course. There's very few areas of the course that right now are on potable water, and that's primarily the putting greens. There's about, of the 143 acres, there's about 3 acres of putting greens. There's also the practice areas near the golf shop that are also on potable water, but the remainder of the course can take this water. How much water we can take to divert that what's going in there, yeah, I think there's only so much we can take. We keep in mind that Paspalum does go dormant during the grass that goes dormant during the winter season. So in reality, there is no irrigation that we expect to have during the winter months. So it would only really be during the spring as it comes out of dormancy, during the summer, and into early fall. But by about November, it goes back into dormancy. So.
Okay. And then similar, you have your plants are more are very carefully selected, but I know that trees are an issue because it's always been marshland, and so it's hard to get trees that fit that kind of an area. And I know that we have a lot of wind, and especially in the afternoons. And so, do we need trees to block the wind, or is that not an issue? Can we get more playing time that's not affected so much by the wind in some way with the use of trees or whatever?
I think I understand your question, and I apologize if I misunderstood it, so please let me know. The design of the course did change the look and layout and the amount of trees that are on the course. It was by design to have fewer trees on the course. By design, incorporating the native areas, incorporating the wispy wind, incorporating that as part of the changing way that the course plays. Whether you play the course in the morning or in the afternoon, it may play like two different courses. Even though you're hitting the same distance, you're hitting into the wind in the morning, and maybe in the afternoon the wind is aiding you. So it's all part of the design. As for will it garner more play, whether there is or is not wind, I think it's a combination of how the links course plays out and how people find it desirable. I don't know that having more trees would make the course more or less desirable. I wouldn't venture there.
I also want to talk about kids, because I know that one of the reasons that the number of rounds has gone down is because there's fewer golfers. And so we have had talks in this commission before about the tremendous number of camps, kids camps, and we've also had a lot. So the question is, how do we, as a city, encourage more kids to come out and try to play golf? Do you have any plans with OB to perhaps have camps or work in with the camps that we already have?
The Community Service Department does support youth learning, youth development, and in particular with golf as well. We have had camps that we offered through Brad Lazarus as well. We do plan on continuing that. During the immediate launch and of OB Sports, however, it's focused on getting the course open. We do plan on discussing with them, and they have youth programs at their other courses, which eventually we can bring up more on board here, aside from what the Recreation Department does on its own through its camp programs, and or aside from what we do with the First Tee of Silicon Valley.
Can they be publicized in the Enjoy catalog, just like any other camp or classes for kids?
I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. Previously, we did do it for programs that we ran with Brad Lazar, so I could anticipate we would do the same with this new operator.
That's great. And forgive me if I didn't hear, but how long is the contract with OB, and how many years before it'll be reviewed? You said there was about a 2 to 3 year startup. When do you expect the first review with OB?
Yes, the 2 to 3 years reference was in regards to getting the course fully ramped up and to reach what we think will be its full operational capacity. So that is independent of the terms and length of the 2 agreements that we have with OB Sports. Those agreements are actually starting off as 39 months agreements. 39 months instead of 36 months is because we're starting in April. So April, May, and June are the 3 additional months tacked on to 3 fiscal years. After the initial 39 months, by mutual agreement of both parties, there is a 3-year extension. And then after the 3-year extension, there's also by mutual agreement an opportunity for another 3 years.
Okay. And then the design of the course is has special plants, and you talk about Scottish links, and will this be a rougher rough or something like that because of the plants that are not on the green? What do you mean by Scottish links design?
Yes, Scottish links design has to do with rolling contours, has to do with bunkers protecting the greens. It has to do with the roughs, but in regards to the rough, it's a different type of rough, meaning that in most golf courses you see here, you'll see different cuts in the fairways. You'll see a low cut in the fairway, and then on the edge of the fairway, you'll then see a higher cut that could be anywhere from 1 inch higher to 2 to 3 inches higher, creating what's called a rough. This course is almost one cut in the fairways all the way up to the edge of either a cart path or a native area. So in essence, the native area then becomes the rough. Now, not all native areas, though, will be in play. Some areas will be out of bounds, depending on whether or not the area is a designated wetland or the area is only a vegetation area. So.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you. I have one comment and really only one question. I would have answered David's question about the wind differently. My experience on links course is the wind is considered to be a feature, not a disadvantage of the courses. This is what's it called, a managed service agreement.
Yes.
And I don't need to know the numbers of what happens if the revenue is missed and what happens if they go over on expenses or whatever. That's obviously part of the contract. But are there other key performance indicators that are part of the measurements?
Yes, there are.
Or the only measurements, the revenue and expense?
Yeah, there are. And before I answer that, one other thing I forgot to mention earlier is annually, and this is Commissioner Moss, I think you asked this, so how often is the the golf course performance and budget reviewed. Annually, OB Sports and the city will work on the next budget year's operations, revenue targets, and expense budget. So it's not that, because we have a 39-month contract, that we don't have any opportunity to review it during those 39 months. It's going to be an annual process within the contract. In regards to the performance measures, there's also rounds of play. There's also average green fee. And then there's also customer satisfaction ratings.
Thank you for your time. Does anybody have one more question? And for the minutes, I'll note that Mr. McCauley has joined us. Thank you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up on the reservations, and I know you will be monitoring the budgetary returns of play, and I certainly appreciate that that plays a factor, an important factor in setting the reservations. I do have some concerns about the lack of priority for Palo Alto residents, and I wonder if we may be able to eventually evolve to a system where a certain number of resident reservation slots may be able to be carved into the system. And a couple follow-up questions. Do the number of non-resident reservations impact the resident rate within the low to high range?
Sorry, can you repeat that portion?
So if there's a bunch of non-resident reservations made, and then the window opens for the residents to make reservations, are the first reservations still going to be at the lowest dollar amount within the range, or because by virtue of the fact that there's a number of reservations already taken by non-residents, do the first resident rates become higher within the range?
No, the resident rates don't become higher within the range. The residence rates are start with each dynamic range is unique to that tier. I think that perhaps that's a better way to answer to you.
On how far in advance it is?
It's a combination of how far in advance and how booked up the tee sheet is. So we don't anticipate the visiting player who has the most advanced to fully book up the tee sheet in any manner. The percentage of golf players we think will still be mostly a high percentage of residents and Bay Area residents, not the visiting players. So we don't anticipate that difficulty for our residents to be able to book a time based on a desire or preference of, let's just say, a weekend morning. We don't think that the tee sheet will be full by the time the residents get their opportunity.
Okay, thank you. I guess that would be a good problem to have. Just a couple more quick questions. Are the high schools planning to use the course for their golf teams?
We previously have offered the golf course to the high school teams, and we can plan on continuing to do that.
And do clubs get reservation priority? The clubs that Ann was mentioning?
The clubs and but by their virtue of being clubs and us slotting in where their play is, I mean, what they would like is ongoing, regular standard times, so like one set time. So by that virtue, they would be quasi-prioritized.
And what defines a club which is afforded the priority of clubs? Is it the regularity of the reservations?
Well, right now we have existing golf clubs. I'm not aware of any new golf clubs that are being formed. I think if that were the case, we would need to discuss with them their club membership, their participation, and what commitment they would make to the golf course. But at this time, we're not aware of any new golf club being created. If it's more the prior clubs wanting to return, and they've all expressed that they want to return.
Thank you for your clarifications. That's all.
Thank you.
So to Jeff's point, you're not sure whether you want all those players who can't afford to play Brandon Dunes to show up here to play our links course, or whether you want them not to show up, right?
I just wondered if it's possible to show us where on the internet we could find the list of other courses that this vendor is is
Yes.
operating, and I kind of like to see their programs. It's very
Sure.
interesting looking at the mod. Yeah.
Their website is obsports.com, and on that website there are links to their courses listed by state.
Yep, I found that, but then
yes.
I can't find out where in the state that the courses are. Is that information available? I just would like to sort of see what programs that they offer, especially for kids and for seniors. I think it's probably around, I'm just not finding it, so that would be great.
Staff will
Thank
email
you.
you. Thank you.
And then I had one other question, sorry.
Go ahead.
So in the past, the superintendent of the Palo Alto golf course obviously did a really good job in the 80s when we had all that play and everything. So how does this work? Does the new vendor manage the staff of Palo Alto, or will we not have any staff who work on the golf course working on the golf course anymore? Any city staff?
Prior to construction, prior to golf construction, the city did not have staff on site maintaining the golf course. It was through a course maintenance contract with Valley Crest, which later became Brightview Golf Maintenance.
Okay, so no city staff worked on the golf course?
Prior to construction and upon this new course, the employees are through OB Sports.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
If there are no other questions or comments, thank you very much for being here and bringing us up to date on what's exciting, and good luck on May 26th.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this opportunity to present to you, and I think everyone's excited as well.
Very much, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we had earlier anticipated changing the next item to be pickleball and tennis courts update rather than the temporary lighting at Coverly. I'm still planning to do that, but I think I'll check first. Is there anybody here who is here for the lighting conversation? Okay, if not, then let's change the order to the pickleball and tennis courts update. If we have speakers, should we have Adam speak first, or should we have the speakers?
Usually Adam speaks and then the speakers. Usually Adam goes first and then the speakers.
Adam, go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioner. Adam Howard, Senior Recreation Manager for the City of Palo Alto. I'm here to give an update on where we are with the pickleball and tennis court situations. A little bit of background. As we do recognize, pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports in the country, which has also become very popular in Palo Alto. We currently don't have any designated courts for pickleball in Palo Alto. However, Mitchell Park tennis courts 5, 6, and 7 are striped for both tennis and pickleball. Those courts are kind of temporarily converted into pickleball courts by organized group that comes out and plays certain times throughout the week. And because pickleball courts are smaller, you can put multiple pickleball courts on one tennis court. Tennis is also extremely popular and valued here in Palo Alto for both youth and adults. We have 30 tennis courts on city property, 24 on Palo Alto Unified School District property, and the only lit courts that city owns are Mitchell Park courts and Rinconada courts 1 through 5. Excuse me, 1 through 5. We rent out tennis courts only to USTA teams or the Palo Alto Tennis Club, and when we do that, we reserve 50% of the courts, always leaving 50% open to the general public. Mitchell Park, Rinconada, and Coverly tennis courts are our highest in demand because of the groupings, because of the quality, and because of bathroom facilities, and because of lights. So a little bit of a discussion. With increasing pickleball play, staff and the Rec Commission have wanted to look at providing space for them. Staff created a preliminary proposal to convert Mitchell Park courts 5, 6, and 7 to pickleball courts, add an additional tennis court to the area that would not be lit. But we heard a lot of feedback that that was not a very good idea, that the pickleball courts were, the tennis courts were in high demand, and really, really did not want to lose lit tennis courts. So, we've heard that feedback. And so we've kind of gone back to the drawing board to come up with as many different solutions as we could think about. We're in the process of doing that. And then we will go, staff will come back to the ad hoc with multiple solution ideas. We'll pick some that we think are most viable, and then we will go out to the community of both tennis and pickleball players to see if we can come with kind of an agreement that works for everybody. We really want to find a solution that works for tennis, that works for pickleball. Both communities value each other. This is just a common issue of space that we have. We don't have a lot of open free space, so there's a shortage of resources that we're trying to find a solution to help both groups. We do hope to put this out to the community a lot. I know the original draft plan went out there and kind of got this is happening, which is not the case. That was staff issue with communication, so I apologize that I've kind of stirred the pot. But we will make sure everything we do is very much vetted through the community and through the ad hoc to do our best to find the best possible solution. So that's where we are. We'll be meeting with the ad hoc next week, the 2nd, and we hope to bring the two communities together by the end of next month to see if we can't come up with some solutions.
Thank you, Adam. We have one speaker card, Robin Cook. If Robin would like to speak, you'd have up to 3 minutes. The microphone is there. I believe you might have to lower it.
Yeah, I think you can hear me.
Speak directly into the phone. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, you can probably hear me. So my name is Robin Cook. I've lived in Palo Alto for 28 years. I'm a homeowner. I have 4 kids. I currently work at Stanford Hospital in the Department of Hematology, and I play tennis. I'm usually playing 3 to 4 days a week, and I like to play in the evenings now or on weekends, and I need the lighted courts, and I really appreciate you getting community input. I'm a member of the USTA, the Tennis Association. I play in league groups, in matches. I play in social groups. My kids play. I have 4 children. And I'm also part of Palo Alto Tennis Club, and I've taken city tennis lessons for several years. And I still haven't improved, so I'm still playing. But I do have concerns over pickleball taking over our tennis courts, because when we go to play after work usually or on weekends, there are people playing before me and people queuing up for our courts after me. So they do seem like they're in demand. And I know pickleball is a growing sport, but I don't find that, I don't want to replace our tennis courts right now. And so if you want to get our input, or if there's some way you can let me know that our voices are being heard, let me know how to do that. Between Palo Alto Tennis Club or USTA tennis leagues, I've been on several different leagues. I'm on one now. I'm usually on one every season of the year. And I like to play tennis, and I like my tennis courts. I also like the alternative for lighting tennis courts, and I feel that Coverly tennis courts are recessed, and that may be an alternative. Did I hit my 3 minutes?
I think yes.
Thank you so much.
Robin, thank you very much. And we will make sure. I think Adam has made it clear that in the future, we will continue to make sure that public input is collected on all of this. And in fact, I would compliment Adam on the input we've had already, because I've attended very many of those meetings, and we've had a lot of both pickleball and tennis players at those various meetings. So thank you for that. I'm going to give the commission a chance to ask Adam's questions. I'll start with David.
I really, really appreciate all the effort you've put into trying to come up with compromises, and we've heard impassioned pleas from both sides, and I just encourage you to keep moving forward on a compromise. It seems like lighting other courts is a great way to go, and maybe we can add another court to Coverly. Maybe we can do a number of things. So I just hope that we can keep that compromise effort going.
Ann?
I'm just happy we're moving forward. I'm happy that we're hearing from all the various groups. I think we've got some great resources in Palo Alto, and I think we will get to some sort of a compromise. And if at the end of the day there needs to be additional lighting, then we'll all have to figure out how we work together to make that happen. So good job, Adam. I know it's been a long process.
Jeff?
I appreciate the effort that Adam and staff have put in helping to try and sort out this pickle. Sorry. Right back at you. And also appreciate all of the input from the community. The passion is certainly out there, and I look forward to continuing work with the ad hoc and staff to find a solution that's workable for everyone. Thank you.
Keith?
Overall, our court situation is working, so we have the luxury of doing it right. We don't have to rush. We can get the public input and make a good decision. So better right than slow, better right than fast.
Jeff? Ryan?
So what are we thinking of in terms of resources that are going to be dedicated to different alternatives? Are you talking about construction of multiple courts in different locations? And in terms of capital improvements, are we talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars? Can you kind of give us a range?
So at this point, all of it. I've looked for alternative spaces where additional courts could be built. I've looked at our existing courts and bumping them out to create more. I've looked at lighting other courts, all of which are somewhat expensive. I mean, if we're talking some of the options of just bumping out courts, $150,000. If we're talking, for instance, lighting Coverly courts, we're looking at about $350,000. And everything within that range, really, depending on how grand we want to go. And I'm trying to look at as many options as I can and provide pricing so we have a full picture as we can have when we try to make these decisions.
And so with some of these numbers in mind, which we're probably talking about, single-digit millions by the time we look at a couple of different parks, it seems as though this sort of capital improvement may be a ways off. Is that fair? It's not something that's going to be implemented in a year or within 6 months.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up. Part of what we'll do is kind of see if we have a phased approach, a quick and easy dirty fix, real quick, to, well, we want to build something, but we know that's 10 years out. But kind of phasing it so people can see what our long-term plan would be.
I think that makes a lot of sense. That's a good way to approach it, I think. I'll just make one other note on timing, which is that I think that when this issue first came to our attention, or at least to my attention, really, the request from the pickleball community was for the ability to make reservations for tennis courts. It wasn't actually dedicated tennis courts. It was just to reserve tennis courts, just like the Palo Alto Tennis Club or USTA does. I would hope that that might be something that we could actually advance the ball on more quickly, because I think that, frankly, the capital improvement component is a much longer term outlook. And so I would ask the ad hoc to keep that in mind and really try and push forward the reservation issue and see if there's some compromise to be reached there and something that we can come up with as a solution on that front.
Yeah, and I would just say that I know the word reservation was used, but time is what they were looking for. Because currently the policy, tennis could just book those courts and the 50 or so pickleball players could show up and they couldn't have any use of the court. So they want a way of having time that's kind of for sure for them.
Excuse me, I'd like to speak to your question with respect to the ad hoc and where we are with updating a policy that would formally allow pickleball play. We have certainly been talking about that on many occasions, and it's really not as simple as it might appear on face value. Right now, we have a policy geared towards tennis play, and now we're looking at adding pickleball play. There'll be similar policies, but then we're looking at, we would have to go to council for a change in the policy, so we would like to get everything lined up at the time that we approach council. We're looking at potentially dedicated pickleball courts, mixed-use pickleball tennis courts, and dedicated tennis courts. Each would have some different distinctions, so there's some nuance to what we're working on.
Yeah, no, I totally appreciate the point that you want to have as comprehensive a proposal as possible. My concern is that this issue has been festering for a while now, and I think that there are parts that we can present solutions on, and we should try and move the ball forward as quickly as we can on what we can.
Agreed. David?
It's so expensive to the land in Palo Alto that if we lit every single tennis court, we would double the number of tennis courts, essentially, because you would have so many more hours that you could play on the existing land, rather than, buying more land, or which we can't do. So if there was some way that we could look at lighting all of them over 10 years or 5 years, it probably would be cheaper per court if you could do a mass effort. And I don't see land getting any cheaper, and I don't see demand getting any less, and I see population increasing. So it's probably something we should take the long view. What Commissioner McCauley said about having a short-term solution is really important, but I think we ought to look at something really substantial. And then we just had earlier today the discussion with Roger Smith, and if there's some way that his 501(c) can be used by the U.S. Tennis Association or the Palo Alto Tennis Court to raise some funds for the first few lit courses at courts, I think that there's probably some money that they might want to donate to speed the effort up. Not that we couldn't do it eventually, but if we want to speed that up. And also from the pickleballers. If the pickleballers can raise some funds to light the courts, then they'll get their courts faster. So both of those, it would be nice to look at. Thanks.
David, thank you, and thank you for raising the issue of where the funds might come from and how do we do that. I think one of the things Roger did say when he was here was we have an awful lot of smart people and an awful lot of capable people in the city, and I totally sympathize with the difficulty of the challenge that Adam has in front of him in terms of courts and dividing, and thank him for all of his efforts. And I also want to thank both the pickleball community and the tennis communities for the kind of effort that they make to be here at a meeting like tonight and make sure that we understand their interest and make sure that we're listening and understanding that there are communities out there that are part of it. So Adam, thank you. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add? I think the combination of long game, back to the golf course, and short game are a really important part of what we're doing. And all we have to do first is get out of the rough. I figured I should take my turn. Adam, thank you. And while you're sitting there, good night and thank you.
So while I'm here, wanted to give an update on how the lighting trial went on the Cubberley Turf Field. Some background on this, during the winter months when daylight savings times end, there's a real high demand for our lit fields as it gets dark much earlier. We currently have 3 fields that are lit, 2 at Mayfield and 1 at El Camino, 1 soccer field, there's 1 baseball field there as well. During these times, those fields are in really high demand. They're booked 7 days a week. During the week, 4 to 10, weekends all day. And there's just a lot of high demand, and we're constantly, looking for additional space. This past year, Palo Alto Soccer Club approached the city with an opportunity. They wanted to try a temporary lighting trial at the Cubberley Turf Field. This proposal was discussed multiple times here and with the public. On January 23rd, with the feedback from the PRC, the trial was approved to move forward. The proposal provided to us by Palo Alto Soccer Club was to place 4 to 6 temporary light stations on the field. Solar powered with generator backups. The lights would be used Monday through Thursday, sunset to 8:30 p.m., hard off at 8:30. That all additional activity would go through Cubberley Community Center, not on Nelson. The additional time would only be used for practice for Palo Alto youth. The lights would be secure, and the lights would be placed in a way that would limit disruption to the field and the track, as well as to be safe for the participants. The trial began February 12th and ended on Sunday, March 11th. Prior to running the test, we really reached out to the Cubberley community. The greatest concerns we heard were to avoid traffic on Nelson, to limit how late the fields were used, and to limit light pollution. The trial and the proposal that was provided, the community really felt answered those questions. Staff felt comfortable that if we stuck to the proposal that we would be able to avoid those concerns. So now that the trial has taken place, some key information about that time. We had roughly 60 to 80 participants a day, so 4 to 6 teams, and those were split between the 5:30 and 7 to 8:30 slots. We ultimately did have to use 6 light stations. After the first night, 4 were placed, and it just left the center of the field far too dark, so they did have to bring in the full 6. The lights were solar powered the entire time. The generators never kicked on. I'm not even sure there were generators on the equipment, so they were never used. The schedule of Monday through Thursday, sunset to 8:30, was followed with no reported incidences. The first couple days, as they went through the schedule, they ended a little bit early, but ultimately they really did fill that time. There was one concern of Nelson. They felt some parents were dropping off, but that was immediately remedied and taken care of, and then we received no further complaints on that. The light stations had what we felt was a minimal impact on the track, but a little bit more impact on someone wanting to use the full field. The full field was used for a couple day games without any incident or concern from the coaches there, but staff did say if this was out here for 3 months, maybe that'd be more of an issue. Post-trial public outreach. So my contact information was all over the place, before the trial, during the trial, after the trial. During the trial, like I said, we did have the one comment about Nelson Drive, which was really taken care of really quickly. And then staff delivered post-trial surveys to the 18 residents that bordered Cubberley Field. I have a map, the highlighted area. We hand delivered those surveys. We really wanted to make sure that we got any feedback that was out there. The surveys were provided self-addressed prepaid envelopes, and they also had the option of taking the survey online. As of today, we had 8 responses. The survey questions and their responses are below. Simple question, were you aware of the temporary trial? And 8 people said yes, and no one said no, with the comment of it was impossible to miss. I'm sorry, scroll down. This is gonna be really hard to read on the screen, I apologize for that. Did the lights from the trial have any negative impact for you or your family? 1 said yes, 7 said no. With the comments, we hated them, noisy, bright, in the way of usage of the field. Soccer is the only one to use the field, and lights degraded all other uses. 2, parking and street congestion was well managed. 3, great to have this activity in the evenings. 4, no problem whatsoever. 5, probably had some cars on Nelson, but overall not a problem, and we want the kids to be able to play soccer. The last question, would you approve a similar lighting plan taking place next winter, January through March, with the same restrictions? 6 said yes, 2 said no, with please have someone continue to monitor that coaches are telling players, parents to park at Cubberley. While well-intentioned, they were the dominant thing is we could see out our kitchen window. And 3, too far participants, possibly precedent setting, and this is not essential. So overall, we thought it was a success, but we do want to hear that some of these comments. And it's a small number of people that replied, but I think that's probably a sign that people weren't too upset with the trial. I felt like we would have heard more had this been have a big impact. Next steps, staff will meet with the Parks and Rec ad hoc committee on fields to debrief and discuss if there's any further next steps that they would like to take. Any questions or comments?
Does anybody have questions or comments? I'll start with Ryan.
Adam, could you just tell us what's the potential range of next steps? Is one end of the spectrum installation of permanent lighting, another one is, continuing temporary lighting for a short
I think at this point, next steps would be considering running the temporary trial in the future for January through March, so a little bit extended and continue this kind of trial. We had never really discussed in too much detail the idea of lights in the long term, simply because as the funding would be hard to do, and we didn't want to muck up the story if we didn't have to, if it wasn't going to be a possibility, if that makes sense. We didn't talk about the permanent lights at this point. And so I guess it's still in the realm of something that the ad hoc might want to discuss.
Adam, did the soccer people feel they needed lights in periods other than these 3 months?
No, because normally they can stay on the grass at that point, and they wouldn't want the additional costs.
So I guess one thing I have in mind is, are there ways to make these lighting units less obstructive, right? And I'm sure that that's on your mind too. How do you make these smaller or more compact so that they don't impact the track, they don't impact other uses of the soccer field? And I don't know that you probably could do that short of something that's more permanent, but.
Yeah, I would say both the quote-unquote issues we had were because they're temporary. So their overall size, and that I would assume the neighbor that had an issue is because of its height. If the lights were actually taller, no one would see them looking out their windows, because it wasn't the light pollution, it was that they physically were looking at the light structure.
A couple quick questions. What other uses of the field besides soccer, I guess people walking around the track, are there other uses of the field itself for other sports or other activities?
Rarely, occasionally ultimate frisbee, but soccer does dominate that field 99% of the time.
Okay. And then as far as parking goes and regulation of traffic and so forth, and parking has come up as an issue for Mitchell Park, and they mentioned it with with pickleball and tennis and so forth. Is that purely a parking and transportation issue? Is that something that Parks and Rec studies? Like who makes some decisions and recommendations on parking and traffic flows?
Are we talking specifically about Mitchell Park now, or just the Nelson Drive?
I would say both Mitchell Park and Cubberley.
So the Cubberley issue was just the residents didn't want to see an uptick of traffic coming along the street for soccer throughout the night. But recreation wouldn't have a role in determining if there's enough parking at Mitchell, for instance, or controlling the traffic. Kristen, I don't know if the planning department would have more of an input onto, is there enough parking and so forth.
And then last question is, in terms of surveys, would it be beneficial? I see we just surveyed those that bordered the park and did 16 surveys. Would it be worthwhile to survey more people in that community to see if it affected them, or to get other feedback based on their proximity to the park?
Yeah, I think we could have. I think when the pre kind of information that went out went to all the neighborhood associations, so it was a much wider net that we casted. And I think because we didn't hear a lot back, we figured that the most impacted group would be the ones that are along the field.
All right, thanks.
I really like this trial. It's paid by the participants' money. We didn't pay except for your time. We didn't pay anything. And if you don't like it, it's not permanent. So I thought it was a really good, and I think we should look at doing it next year also. One question, if you had the same units, is there anything that you could do to minimize the effect of the field? For example, could you move, obviously if they redesigned it and had a smaller unit, you could do something, but with the units that you had this year, could you move those off every Thursday night and move them back on Monday morning?
So it would have been very costly. I know a lot of the charge that they received was just the delivery, and every time they came out, that would have been a charge.
And that's nothing that we could have moved ourselves?
No, they're pretty
bulky.
big. You'd have to get them onto a truck and move them somewhere.
Okay. I mean, looking backwards, was there something that you would have done differently?
I think I may have tried to move the end zone lights further and change the angle at which they were shining down at to see if we could have moved them a little further away but still provided the good lighting without it going towards the neighbors. What was really good is outside of the track, it was dark. Like there was very minimal light pollution. The light was not shining in very far, which I thought was great. So if we could have moved them back and tried to change the angles a little bit, I think I would want to try that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for all of your effort on this trial, Adam. I think the trial has gone extremely well. I know when I was first approached by Palo Alto Soccer Club about the idea, I felt like we were going against the third rail here, but it really worked out well. And I have spoken with people in the Green Meadow neighborhood, even someone in the survey area who did not return the survey and is not a soccer family by any means, and they were very supportive of the plan. I've only heard positive comments, which is encouraging, and I agree with what you said, that if there were issues, we would have heard from more people, most likely. A question I have is, if we were to move forward, and I know the ad hoc would be addressing this, if we were to move forward with a trial next year, is this something that the commission would be able to approve without going to city council, or would you envision that we'd need to go to city council as a next step? And you don't have to give me an answer right now. This is obviously something we'll need to work out.
Well, we didn't go to council this year. The idea was to just give them a heads up that it was happening, so if they happened to be, in the neighborhood and saw it or heard something, that they were aware of what was going on. I think if it was going to be a long-term practice, that it no longer becomes a trial, but we do temporary lighting every year, and that's just, part of our operations. We would probably just, my guess is we would inform them through like an informational report, but I don't know if they would have to take action. I'd probably have to look into that a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. And the other area to consider as we potentially move forward, is how the permitting process would become open to other youth organizations in addition to Palo Alto Soccer Club.
Yeah, in my opinion, that would be one of the bigger questions that we would need to figure out an answer to.
And I don't think it would be a particularly complicated issue, and there is increased cost for the additional lighted fields then. So it may be a problem that sorts itself out relatively easily. Thank you.
Ann?
Well, I love the idea that we had this temporary trial, and I think it worked out pretty well. I think we learned a lot. I'd love to see us do it again next year, whether we have to go to council or not. And then I'd really love for the ad hoc to get the pricing for permanent light, so that we have that available from some of the experts that are here in Palo Alto, so we know what we're looking at, because anytime we can increase the amount of field space and time for kids and for adults to play I think is really great. So good job on this. And I think this came to us in December 1st. So we should get a big kudo too for how quickly, was it December? Something like that?
Yeah, pretty
Anyhow,
close. I
good
know
job.
at first.
Good job, you guys. Yeah.
As unofficial shepherd of Cubberley Fields, and Darren gets a note from me every week, it seems, on something or other. I got a lot of comments, and they pretty much match what you've already seen. And I just, one thing that I want you to add is that we had to add the middle lights in the middle of the field, and there is very, very little room between the track and the field. And we were promised that during the practices, they would not use the full field. What I didn't think is that we have a whole lot of use of the full field during the day. And those lights are very, very close to the edge of the field. So when you have these day games, especially like the private schools, after school soccer games, league games, it's problematic. And I would add bumpers all around that structure because it's just too close. And there's no place to put them because you can't put them on the track because there's a whole lot of people that run the track and they're going to get mad. If you move them either further back, even further back, you run into the problem with, especially on the south side, where you may not get enough light through the trees. And so that's something I would suggest. And also, if there is any way to get the smaller footprint, especially those middle field lights. I was hoping against hope that we wouldn't need the middle field lights, but that didn't turn out to be the case. And then the second thing I wanted to mention is that any talk of permanent lights would require a whole new trial because you're going to get people who are going to be mad at there's a lot of noise. And so you are guaranteeing the noise level well into the night, 365 days a year, and that in itself is a hot button. Not to mention the light. So you're going to get. So I would be very cautious about that. And go with the temporary lights for a few years before you think about permanently lighting that whole field. That's really all I had.
So I can only say, Adam, congratulations. It must feel good to have something that actually came to fruition and got us extra fields and got more people involved in using city facilities and not have to continue to debate. Thank you very much.
Chair, could I just make a comment?
Yes.
I've heard a couple commissioners mention about permanent lighting there, and I do want to just be clear that that's not something we're considering at this point. And I just confirmed with Darren, because I had heard before that when the fields were put in, that was discussed, permanent lighting, and it was really opposed by the neighbors and the residents there. So that's not something we're considering now, and if it is something that we would in the future, it would be, we'd have to do significant outreach and just getting, buy-in and support from the community there.
Thanks for that, Kristen. I think there was some confusion as we talked about whether this wasn't permanent lighting, but we did the temporary lighting permanently. I think there was two different thoughts through here. Are we going to do this every year? Because my understanding from the soccer people was they only needed it for these 3 months. They weren't asking for it for the rest of the time. And I think at this point we should take them at their initial word that that's what they wanted it for. And maybe we can consider saying, yep, we're going to do this every year as long as we find the right funding, and that would include them. Maybe that needs to be a decision that gets made, so that we're doing it temporarily, permanently, but not permanently, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, if I might, though, I would say that if the better solution is to have permanent infrastructure, even if it's not used year-round, but to have better infrastructure, then I think that you should consider that.
Yeah, I would agree with that, just to see if we can get a price for permanent lighting, and then everybody understand that the permanent lighting is much easier to focus on the field. It doesn't have all that bleed every place, and the lighting consultants come out and direct where it goes and everything, and you can go right up to a field and not even know that you used to be able to find the field by where the lights were. You can't do that anymore, because it's so focused now, depending upon the height of the light poles.
Jeff?
Based on a conversation I had with another staff member recently, something to consider is the refurb plan for the Coverly football field when the turf is going to be replaced, and apparently there's thoughts of replacing the track. At that point, we can plumb for lighting, so we have the infrastructure in place to move forward on something in the event that the community and the city decides that we want to move forward.
With that, I'll thank Adam.
Actually, if you don't mind, I'll be very quick. I had one other tangential question, and it's kind of sparked by something that Jeff said, which is temporary lighting an option, putting aside soccer and Coverly, is it an option that you're looking at for tennis courts, for example, or other facilities?
I haven't, especially tennis courts, given the footprint of these particular lights, it'd be really difficult. But the rest of this conversation is something we have to consider anytime we talk about lights at any location, right, is the footprint and the neighbors and the noise levels and all of that. But especially these units, the units I've seen are typically pretty big, so to put them around tennis courts would be pretty difficult.
But maybe you could get smaller ones, I don't know.
Right, and placement outside of the tennis court, right, for example, might be something you could look into. Just something to keep in the back of your mind as the other conversation progresses.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. Get up and leave. Thank you very much on both those topics and your perseverance. I'd like to quickly go through and see if there's any other ad hoc committee or liaison updates that might want to have. I don't have a list of the committees. I'm going to just do it by person. I'll start with Ryan.
So, Darren, you had sent an email yesterday, I believe, concerning dog parks in Bowden. And I just wanted to mention this very quickly, and I don't want to discourage anyone at all from thinking about possible placement of dog parks and Bowden in that conversation. However, and Darren, correct me if I'm wrong about this, I think that your CIP plan has the next dog park or even the funding for dog park improvements 2 years out. So it would be fiscal year 2020.
Yes, right. Yes, that's correct.
So two thoughts. The first is that Bowden Park is really very close in proximity to Pierce Park, where the dog park is being constructed. And so in thinking about where amenities are located, Bowden Park probably has dropped far down the list in my mind, just because it's so close to Pierce Park. The second thing I just want to note quickly is that I think that a number of our existing dog parks need
Ryan,
improvement.
I'm going to suggest that maybe we could bring dog parks back again to a different meeting and have a fuller discussion of it.
Sure. I'll be very brief. But anyway, the point is just that our other dog parks need some improvement. And unless we're interested in dedicating additional or seeking to have parks dedicate additional CIP funds towards dog parks, I don't know where the money is going to come in the near future. So,
Jeff, do you have anything?
Yeah, just quick question about the impact of the survey that came back and the impact of that on the master plan, and perhaps, I don't know if we need a conversation about that with the commission, or and would that be the master plan ad hoc, but something to consider with that, the survey that was just received by the city?
Kristen, do you want to comment?
Commissioner Lemire, you're referring to the polling that was done?
Yes.
With respect to a future ballot measure, not just for parks, but for other infrastructure needs within the city. That was presented to Finance Committee Tuesday night, and I wasn't there, and I'm hesitant to speak to something I'm not an expert at. But you can, if you want information soon, you can view the presentation. I watched part of it today, and it's quite interesting. The consultant is, this is their business, and they know what they're talking about. So how they assess it and evaluate all of the outcomes of the polling is quite interesting. There's going to be additional, I believe there's going to be additional polling done. So I think when we get to a point where we have more information, I may be able to bring someone in who could give a presentation on what that polling means,
Well, and just to
what
keep
the
us
next
updated,
steps
because
are.
next steps would need to happen fairly quickly if it's a November ballot measure in terms of things for the parks and what we may need to do.
Right, it is a very quick timeline and turnaround on getting it onto a November ballot if that's what council decides to do.
And especially because council takes summer off too, so that
Jeff,
complicates it further.
Jeff, I totally agree, and I think we need to encourage our council member to attend, particularly considering his participation in the whole funding effort, and keep us apprised that way. I think that would be good. In the meantime, I'll make sure I talk to him with Kristen, and we'll see if there's some way to get an informed update for us.
That would be helpful from my perspective, too. I guess as I read that document, it seemed to be the case that the parks were not polling well.
Exactly.
In terms of,
So we need to understand that. Keith?
Nothing.
Yes, I have an update regarding community gardens in my liaison role. I attended a couple of meetings this past month, which Catherine Borkin organized with the community gardens, a couple hours each, one for Johnson, Ventura, and Eleanor Garden, and another for Rinconada Gardens. This was a first-time event and kind of an experiment that was put together. Each was attended by 25 to 40 gardeners, soliciting suggestions and discussing maintenance and rules issues. It's moving towards considering rules and policy changes that will be discussed further, and I believe would eventually end up coming before this body for consideration and approval. So just a quick update there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann, do you have anything? David?
Two things. I went to the State of the City presentation by Liz Niss on Wednesday, and I think I was surprised to hear that the Jewish Community Center, where it was housed, is building a public park, a quote-unquote public park. And I don't know how public it'll be. It's not the same as a Green Meadow Park where it's really private property, and but at the same time, I wanted to find out if we could find out how public it is and what the facilities are we're going to have, because I'd sure like to be able to tout it, when we talk about the number of parks that we have. So anyway, if we could look at that, that would be great. And then the second thing is that I was talking to one of the council members at that State of the City, and he was saying that the Fry's property plus Boulware Park plus AT&T should really be thought of as one entity. And I know that Commissioner Reckdahl is on the North Ventura Neighborhood Association. He's the liaison. And if there's any way that we can keep pushing for that whole entity to be considered one entity, and I know that they want the whole tone of the State of the City address was about affordable housing, and that is one of the biggest and most visible locations for affordable housing, lots of units. It makes total sense to try to tie in with that because that's where you would need more parkland, park space.
My understanding is that they are taking over, just not looking at Fry's, but looking at the whole surrounding area, so it will be comprehensive.
So do you have more, David?
That's it.
Thank you. So I would comment on a couple of things. Kristen and I did go to the Friends of Palo Alto Parks, and the only thing I would comment there is I think we witnessed the same enthusiasm from everybody in the room as we saw from Roger tonight. I think that was really positive, and I think we agreed that building that partnership is beneficial for everybody. Relative to the Ventura Park thing, Keith is certainly our representative. My understanding is it's basically a comprehensive plan activity that'll go on for some period of time. And if we have individual concerns, there's no reason why we can't go as individuals rather than as commission representatives to those meetings. And I would encourage that participation. The next topic would be tentative agenda. I just wrote down maybe we need a dog park update. Maybe we need more input on the results of the polling. Maybe we could even invite somebody from the JCC to come and tell us about their park plans. There won't be anything by the next meeting relative to the Ventura activity because I don't think they start until June. I don't know if anybody has anything else that's a burning issue that they would like to add. If not, I'll ask the vice chair to meet with me and Kristen and see if we can't come up with an agenda. Ann, did you have something you wanted to add as a topic?
Is it time yet to hear about the aquatics contracts, where we are with them, or is it premature?
The RFP hasn't been released yet. It should be very soon. So it's probably in the next couple of months, I would say, might be an appropriate time.
We'll put it on the list for...
But so if I could interject, in your packet or the email that Natalie sent with your packet, there is the future agenda items there.
Oh, right.
In May, I've talked to the Palo Alto Recreation Foundation, and just like we had Roger come today, they're willing to come next month and sort of have the same conversation.
Great.
So that is planned for May. And then in June, there was a request, the last time the chair, vice chair, and I met, which was just a few weeks ago, there was a request to have a discussion on what our CIP process is. You know, how do we make those decisions every year, the capital improvement plan process. So I put that on for June, and then that would also be a discussion of our 5-year CIP because we're going through our new budget process right now.
Is that then sort of a discussion too about the developers' fees and how they get allocated for community benefit, or it's a whole different thing?
That's different.
I think that would be different.
If that's an interest, we can have that on a future agenda as well. And then I believe in June, and Darren, correct me if I'm wrong, our consultant for the Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan will be coming and presenting on the progress on that plan so far.
Go ahead.
Would next month be appropriate for a Foothills Park update? It seemed like you were alluding to that earlier in the meeting.
On the trail status? Yeah, I think so.
I don't know if that needs to get agendized or not, but I'll leave that to your good judgment.
Yeah, thank you. I'll see how it goes with planning. It might just be something that suits a department update.
David?
There were two possible topics that were mentioned in previous meetings, and one is the teens presenting sort of at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year what they accomplished or what they want. So I don't know if you wanted to do one at the end of the year, have some representatives come and talk. And it would probably have to be May. So maybe it's too late, and maybe it has to be next October or something.
I can look into that. They're on the agenda for the May Policy and Services Committee meeting, and then possibly a joint study session with council, although we're having a hard time getting commitment because there's AP testing and there's finals and all this happens this time of year, so we want to make sure they're focusing on that. So maybe the fall might be a better time, or mid-year.
Or you just invite us to one of those other ones, and so you kill two birds with one stone.
That would work too. Sure, I will let you know what those dates are.
Okay, and then the other topic was dedicated parkland, how you do that.
And that's on the, there's a future agenda items list at the bottom of that calendar, and park dedication is there.
We didn't figure that until the golf course contract was done, we should be asking the legal staff to come and talk to us. So if that's it, we have some good notes, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Ann.
Second?
Thank you, Keith.